Chicago, this is Chris Dumont with our Beyond the Beltway analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public service professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight featuring commentary by Dan Miller, Luke Tanen, and John McCarran. Our program tonight coming to you from our home base at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago. This is a recorded edition of our program, so no phone calls. But if you'd like to send us an email comment, btb@museum.tv. And if you'd like to watch us on the World Wide Web, it's www.beyondthebeltway.com. And it's nice to have you with us for, as I said, this recorded Chicago-only television version of our broadcast this week. And before we get into some specific issues about Chicago's future and the important role that the city can play in encouraging innovation in the city, which is very important not only to the future of the city, but obviously to the businesses that operate here. We are going to talk about some of the reality of this past week. Obviously, it was dominated by the NATO demonstrators and the NATO participation in the summit. And Dan Miller, a longtime friend of this program with the Heartland Institute and also involved in the Innovation Awards, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. The NATO summit. Was it good for Chicago, and if so, in what way?
It was good in many, many ways. Psychologically, the only way that it wasn't good, Bruce, is from a business standpoint, because several businesses really took a hit, especially in the South Loop, where a lot of the demonstrations were held. Many of those retailers, and that includes barbers as well as food stores, took a big hit on their attendance and big hit at the cash register.
John McCarran also joins us from DePaul University, longtime member of the Tribune family, as it was, including the member of the editorial board, longtime columnist, 37-plus years with the Trib.
27.
27. Good or bad for Chicago, and what were the pluses, and should we try to do things like this again?
Oh, it was good. Yeah, I have a regular op-ed in the Trib, and I said, hey, let's get on with this. What are we, kids? Let's do this thing, because there was so much fretting and worrying, and and frankly, the press was doing. We were doing front page stories on how they were installing bomb-proof waste cans along the streets and whatnot, and sort of getting everybody ready for worst case scenario. And I thought it came off fairly well. Although as your designated liberal, I always kind of cringe whenever there's going to be demonstrators coming into town, because I kind of cut my political or came of age during the Nixon era, and he was created by the radical left in the streets, and it's always kind of puts me off.
And 6 months ago, when you were on this program, you and I were talking about the possibility of the NATO. We thought it was going to be G8 at the same time. We were looking at this last weekend as potentially a weekend with significant political ramifications for the presidential election.
Well, we were, because we were all old enough to remember 1968 and the fiasco that occurred on South Michigan Avenue in front of the Conrad Hilton, the so-called police riot, according to a follow-up report on the thing. It just gave Chicago a tremendous black eye, and I think it really hurt the chances of Hubert Humphrey of getting elected that year.
Luke Tanen also joins us. He is director of the Chicago Innovation Awards. Luke, nice to have you with us. When you look at what happened this past week and almost a year and a half of hype leading up to it and all of the money that was invested in making this meeting happen, could that money be used elsewhere? And if so, what else of a positive nature might have happened in this city?
Well, I think, in hearing the mayor talk about NATO and how excited he was to have it here, he talks about the long-term positive impact, the long-term positive image that Chicago would have on a global stage. And this is kind of an investment that's being made now. And certainly there was a hit to local businesses, especially in the downtown area. But I think not only it being good for Chicago on a global stage, I think it was good for Chicago, just to Chicagoans, in terms of knowing that we can pull off something this grand and this big, and be proud of ourselves.
But how much did it cost us?
I don't think there's been an accounting yet. But really, Bruce, how can you put a price on the psychological boost that Chicagoans got? Luke and John both touch on it. And John's column, the headline...
Psychological boost for whom?
As a Chicagoan, I felt that way. I was proud of the city. I was proud of McCarthy, the chief of police. I was proud of the mayor. Yeah, everything went along extraordinarily well. I felt sorry for the businesses that lost a little bit of money. But, boy, in the long term, it was a great investment.
And how will we measure its success economically, or can we not do that?
Oh, I think we can. We can attribute business recruitment to discussions that will grow out of companies that were here. It'll show up in Chicago's marketing ability as it takes Chicago abroad and presents Chicago to companies abroad and tell them that this is a great place for a convention. This is a safe city. This is a spectacularly beautiful city. Thank God the weather was nice. Mm-hmm. It really turned out well. And I just want to say, John, that column that you wrote and the headline on it, "We Can Do This, Chicago," I mean, that was just a real gutsy, upfront thing. Quit the complaining and let's get on. We can do this. And by God, we did.
Yeah, that's right. I took my cue from an earlier column by Greg Hines and Cranes. The headline was "Quit Your Belly Aching." Get on with it. You know?
Two professional belly achers, and you just showed us how to get over it.
and the police certainly did a terrific job.
Absolutely.
I mean, I live on the north side, actually, basically in the downtown area, not very far from here. I have to tell you, I walked 3 blocks or 2 blocks to work, but I didn't even know there was anything going on other than the substantial number of police that were in this museum as their command post. So I was surrounded by 200 police officers, so I felt safe.
Very safe.
But, I mean, there was no sign of any demonstrators anywhere within my eyesight.
They did a fine job of keeping the demonstrators off the Mag Mile, off the retail strip. And John, I presume that you kind of resent that, but really that was the way to do it. They could demonstrate all they wanted, and indeed they did. It was a very carefully strategized program that worked.
Yeah, I suppose, although you do kind of push the envelope on Ian, do you really want to create like bullpens that you put the protesting bulls and, or do you want to let them get to the places that have more visibility? I mean, there are trade-offs involved.
Well, it seemed to me that yes, they want a right to protest, but they also were insisting on a right to have people look at them, especially the people who were at NATO. And you don't get that right.
Yeah. And I'm a little bit ambivalent about the whole thing because I think street protests just are not good politics, no matter whether you're left, right, or whatever. Americans just don't like to see people, raising Cain in the streets.
Did they make their point, Luke? Did the protesters make their point, or was most of the hype about the police protecting the city and forgetting what the message of the protesters were?
So I was smartly out of town this past weekend. I was in St. Louis, but from what certainly reading the papers and listening to the news, it sounded like there wasn't a tremendous amount of cohesion amongst the messages that maybe the protesters were looking to get out. And I think had it been maybe one singular cry, it might have been more impactful. But going back to what you mentioned before about the police, I thought it was really impressive that McCarthy was down there with the rank and file, and he was leading by example. I think that went a long way to really encourage a lot of inspire the police force, but also the fact that he was able to keep it under control, because I think the expectation was that it was going to get out of control. So the fact that it didn't, I think, leads it to be a successful experience.
We've got to pause. We'll be back. Thanks for joining us. This is a recorded edition of Beyond the Beltway. Nice to have you with us tonight. Dumont back at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. A reminder that on June 12th, we will have our 25th anniversary salute and benefit reopening the new Museum of Broadcast Communications. Betty White's going to be here. Hugh Downs is going to be here. John Mahoney's going to be here. Hopefully you're going to be here. If you'd like to get tickets, you can go to museum.tv. Museum.tv. The stars will be here. It's exactly our 25th anniversary to the day, and we will open to the general public the following day on the 13th. at 10 o'clock in the morning, 25 years to the moment.
Congratulations.
Cut the ribbon, and third time, and that's it. I'm done. Well,
Here, here.
That's it. Over. One of the things in our in the first segment we were talking about, obviously, is NATO. The image of Chicago, you said, is positive. I assume that you view this as a big, big win for Rahm Emanuel on the national and international stage.
I think it's a great thing to add to the resume for Chicago.
For Rahm.
And for Rahm as well, being the
You think
one.
he's interested in adding to his resume?
Did you see what he did with the Sun-Times interview with Franz Spielman? He signed a piece of paper that said, "I pledge I will not run for any other office." Signed, Rahm Emanuel.
I agree with that.
Really?
Those who instantly saw him running off to plan a campaign for the White House when he was elected, I didn't buy that at all. It doesn't make any sense.
Ever? But now he says ever.
I would say ever. I would say that those chances are slim and none, and there's certainly not anything that's going to happen realistically in this point in time. First of all, I mean, he's got to concern himself as to whether, the guy who he's closest associated with is even going to get reelected.
Mm-hmm.
I think the chances of, the Democratic primary voters and the public picking another, Chicago Democrat to follow a Chicago Democrat, I think are slim and none.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's politically astute enough to know that, that's not going to, and he wouldn't necessarily play well in Iowa and New Hampshire. But he could be a great mayor, and I think he maybe his goal is to be the mayor for 20, 25 years.
Well,
that would be a good idea, because I think he's been a terrific mayor so far.
I do too, but he's got his biggest problems are yet unsolved, and that includes the budget, the pension, the schools. The teachers are ready to walk out. They've got thousands, and they don't even have a contract to complain about. They're just complaining about him.
Well, let's talk about from the euphoria and all the positive stuff that we've talked about that the NATO brought. A lot of people who are watching the show tonight would say, all the money that went into planning this, I mean, all the meetings, the planning, all the police, everything else. If you were to take that money and you were to put it into one of the city's problems, whether it is schools or the rising crime rate, the murder rate, whatever the case may be, that the citizens of Chicago, including those businessmen on the South Side who had a real bad, 4 days or 4 or 5 days, that maybe that's a better way to make the city overall a better place to live and start solving some of these problems that, especially, the one that I keep talking about all the time is just the violence. I mean, the violence and the murders and the image that the city has because of what we see every night leading off the 10 o'clock news, John.
Yeah, well, I find myself in the awkward situation of agreeing with Dan that if we can get some more corporate headquarters, maybe even North American headquarters of foreign corporations to come here as a result, that the region will benefit and the poor and dispossessed will benefit as well. It's kind of a trickle down thing.
But these images we're talking about, I mean, Boeing came here, which was everybody said was great. More and more people are getting murdered. I mean, Boeing didn't come here to come to a city where the school system is crumbling, the pension system is bankrupt, and people are getting, a dozen people every night are being shot on the south or west side.
Well, that's true, but Boeing was wooed by saying, this is the Art Institute where we're having dinner tonight. This is Belmont.
Wonderful.
This is Belmont Harbor where you can, park your 26-footer.
But how does that help the guy in Chicago?
Well, it does only indirectly, and then after Boeing gets here and all the law firms and accountancies and ad agencies that are going to service Boeing, realizing that Boeing only brought like 500 suits, right? It's a trickle down dynamic, and also in the mayor's defense, I think a lot of the money that was raised for the soft stuff, the social stuff, taking all the first ladies down to the Comer Center on the South Side, and the dinner at the Art Institute was private bucks. That wasn't your tax money.
Go ahead.
Police overtime, that's another matter.
But, John, the money that was contributed to do that is not going to be contributed by the donors to give to a new health facility in Englewood. The donors expect some return on that, and what they expect is that they will impress the wives or impress the executives themselves who are at NATO, or the people, the fish who are swimming around the big NATO whale, that they're going to get some return on that. So I think it's unrealistic to say, well, you could have put that money into a health care or put it into this or that.
No,
it
but I
wouldn't
think,
have been there in the
but I
first
think
place.
you can argue that again, and I would say that NATO to a much lesser extent than the Olympics. I mean, the amount of money that we burned on getting the Olympics here unsuccessfully, I mean, that amount of money where every single business in Chicago or in Illinois was shaken down by the mayor to contribute to that particular thing. The point is, the losers on that were nonprofits, many nonprofits. They did not, the money went for the big project, and there was trickle down in a bad way, because they weren't getting donations. So there is an impact on the city.
Well, you've got to do both, and I think the nonprofits are doing.
Who are you
both.
referring to when you say that?
Well, I would assume we're talking about the philanthropic organizations in Chicago, of which there are many, and
right,
and,
like
and
the
large
MacArthur
ones.
Foundation,
like the MacArthur and the Chicago Community Trust and whatnot. I mean,
No, but I'm also talking about. I'm talking about. And again, I'm not talking about this museum, but I'm talking about generally museums and libraries and things of that nature.
Comes out of the same pocket, so the more for downtown, the less for the.
Right.
I mean, there's something to that, but this mayor is a great shaker downer, and in fact, if you had to say what is his ultimate fundraising, is his ultimate thing, that's how he came up. That's how he got involved.
That's his training.
He's
politics.
a fundraiser. Absolutely, he can twist arms like no mayor we've ever had in the city of Chicago. For sure, and he's at the same time he's twisting arms for NATO. He's also twisting arms, for instance, to get employers to partner up with our community colleges, with the city colleges of Chicago. The hospitals to hire med techs and whatnot. So I mean, he's getting it done at both levels. I think.
When we talk about these issues of schools and violence and the pension issues, how can we use the passion that brings at least two of the three people to our program this evening is really the whole concept of innovation. How do you encourage people to be more creative, to be more communicative with each other? Luke, that you are the director of the Innovation Awards. For those people that don't know what that is, what is an Innovation Award and how does one get one?
So the Chicago Innovation Awards, which was started by this guy to my left here and Tom Kuzmarski, 11 years ago, they were both, I guess I'll tell the story for Dan, they were both frustrated that on a national level, on an international level, when people talk about innovation, the next new product, the next new service, the next new technology, they say, for example, in Silicon Valley there's this and this, in Boston there's this, in San Diego there's this, and the conversation was never really falling on Chicago as a hub of innovation. So that was kind of the goal behind the Innovation Awards, was to celebrate great new products and new services in the Chicago region. So by going to ChicagoInnovationAwards.com, you can currently nominate your new product or your new service for an award, and we have this whole year's worth of events to connect the community and celebrate our successes, to hopefully not only recognize innovation but inspire more of it, because we've seen that innovation directly leads to economic growth and job creation, and I think whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you kind of agree that those things are good. So it's been a fantastic program that Dan started 11 years ago and is still going strong.
I think
take a bow.
Well, no, Bruce. Tom Kuzmarski has been just brilliant, and Luke has too. But setting aside the back patting, you hit the nail right on the head when you said, how do you get out of these silos? How do you get people to talk to each other? And that's what the Innovation Awards has done. We've been very successful in raising money from the business community because we're very non-threatening. We're not trying to put the MacArthur Foundation out of business. We're not trying to take over KPMG's Entrepreneur of the Year Awards. Our job is to celebrate innovation, to say, great job, all you innovators, and we give them an award at the Harris Theater in Millennium Park. 1,500 screaming fans are in the theater applauding it. What we're doing is changing the mythology of Chicago, convincing people down in the street level, the regular people, that Chicago is a hub of innovation. And nobody's tried to do that before. We've been pretty successful over 11 years.
Does the innovation and the enthusiasm that you bring for this, and I want to continue to talk about this, but does that fit into at least the narrative that we're looking at right now in the presidential election, where the Obama administration seems to be making a big point of Bain Capital And certainly the implication is that Mitt Romney is a guy who's only cares about Wall Street and only cares about dollars and cents, and is cut from a different cloth than Barack Obama.
No.
Is that do you view that at least approach, which some people perceive as a key to the president's reelection, is keep hammering the successful person? Is that a slap to the innovation community?
It has been proven successful, this attack on Bain and the 1% kind of stuff. It's been proven successful by Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum in the primaries. So that's why Obama is falling back on it. But it's a loser in long term because people are seeing, I believe, that they're cherry picking out of Bain's portfolio things that have failed. But Bruce, Bain has been around for 30 years, and you don't keep a company going around for 30 years if it's continually taking over a company and then parceling it out to naive rubes after they've sucked all the assets out of it, and then they're going to sell it to McCarran because he's not smart enough to see that this company is hollowed out. In other words, Bain has created wealth. Bain has innovated. Bain has brought new thinking to a lot of the companies that it's dealt with. It's been a very creative destruction process, in some cases, destroying companies that couldn't make it in the market, redeploying the capital, and putting it into more productive areas.
I want to talk more about innovation in Chicago and how it can be encouraged here, and some of the other things that folks watching the show this evening might want to know about, including a 24/7 innovation center where you can go in and innovate at 3 in the morning. Bruce Dumont back. Thanks very much for being with us this evening on this television-only version of our show. John McCarran is here. He is an adjunct professor of journalism at DePaul University, also teaching a course in politics. Long time involved in urban journalism with the Chicago Tribune, over 27 years there. And also Dan Miller joins us. He is the publisher and executive director of the Heartland Institute and the former business editor of the Chicago Sun-Times, the 11th largest newspaper in the United States, at least when you were there. Editor of City and State, publisher of City and State at Crane's publication. Crane Chicago Business, native of Minneapolis, St. Paul.
No, just St. Paul, Bruce. Just St. Paul.
And most importantly, he is the creator and author of a book called Innovating Chicago Style: How Local Innovators Are Building the National Economy. The foreword was by Mayor Rahm Emanuel. And also joining us this evening is his colleague, Luke Tanen. Luke is the director of the Chicago Innovation Awards, and he is also an author of this book. Let me ask you, Luke, how have local innovators built the national economy?
Well, they've done it in many ways. That's the tagline of this book. And what we've seen in Chicago, what's unique is the breadth of innovation. So, Chicago's not just a high-tech town, although there is a high-tech sector. There's healthcare innovation, there's nonprofit innovation, big companies and small companies. And that's what we've seen with this book, Innovating Chicago Style. What we did was interview 80 different winners of the Innovation Awards that cut across all industries. And we asked all of them the same 5 questions, which was, what was the problem you identified? What was your solution? How is it unique? What's the impact been? And what does the future hold? And in asking those 5 questions, we learned things that answer what you said, which is how are they building the national economy? And it's by creating these new products, these new services that are yielding new revenue and creating new jobs at their companies and hiring folks that then do great things where they are, but also then spin off new things too.
What do you find? Is there a common denominator why these guys keep going?
No,
Dan?
I don't think so, Luke. It's just such a wide variety of people and how some guys and women came to their ideas sitting in a hammock in the backyard on a Memorial Day weekend, and he just got an idea for solving a mechanical problem that related to his product. If there's any, I don't know, it's big companies and small companies, public sector, private sector. I guess it's innovation. If you had to say what's a common denominator, it's persistence.
I'd say also one thing that they share is an appetite for taking risks and also embracing failure, because you need to have that if you're going to want to take the risk to innovate. And so I think that's something that a lot of these folks shared when we talked to them.
We're big, obviously, Chicago boosters because we all live here. John McCarran, could there be a book in innovating Minneapolis, St. Paul? I mean, are there other cities, if not as large as Chicago? Is there Los Angeles? Are there other cities that could write the same book? Or do they handle innovation differently?
The book wouldn't be as thick. I'm sure, Honeywell up in Minneapolis has come up with a lot of things. I know, I turn the thermostat on my in my living room every day, and I genuflect toward Minneapolis. Chicago, I mean, the thing about Chicago is, necessity is the mother of what? And, we needed to ship meat from the stockyards around the country, so we invented the refrigerated rail car. We needed to build thousands of houses after the city burned down in 1871, so we invented a standardization of lumber. Every time you see a 2x4, basically that was invented in Chicago, because before that the lumber wasn't standardized. But when you have to build a lot, so necessity is the mother of invention. I look around the city right now and I see 60,000 foreclosed and abandoned dwelling units, and I say to myself, there's a necessity. Where's my innovation? So that would, if I were to point one area that sort of begs for someone to come up with a new mousetrap, it would be what to do with all these empty houses.
Well, if there's somebody that's watching the show this evening that thinks they have an idea, and if you go to a cocktail party, there's always 2 or 3 people that are working on some new idea. But I mentioned before the break, there's a place that's open 24 hours, 7 days a week, where innovators and entrepreneurs can gather and just sort of engage. Tell us more about 1871.
So the 12th floor of the Merchandise Mart has become one of the most exciting floors in the city, and this is where 1871 is housed. And it's run by the CEC, which is headed up by Kevin Willer. And the idea is that it's a physical space. It's 50,000 square feet, where new companies can get their start, and it's extremely affordable rent, and there's a tremendous amount of hundreds of like-minded individuals who are also starting companies. There's VCs and angel investors. There's the universities have a presence there. Tech folks. It's mostly focused on digital technology, which is a really hot field here in Chicago. And it's a place where the goal is that all these tenants won't be there for very long, because they'll start their company, they'll grow it quickly, then they'll need to move out and get space where they need to hire 20 or 30 folks.
So who pays for all this?
Well, the initial investment was put up by people, the venture capital community in Chicago, led by J.B. Pritzker and MK. We just met. No. Anyway, the venture capital companies put it up. Yes.
Big names.
Big. A lot of money went into it.
The list is so long we can't name them all. That's all right.
On our board.
That's right.
But I'm sorry, Bruce. Well, I know. You could go in there. Both of you guys could go in there and rent a chair and rent a desk, and you're going to be hanging around with other men and women
I got plenty of empty space in my building here.
Well, okay, you don't need it, but plenty of entrepreneurs do, Bruce. You can rent as little as a desk and a chair and sit there with Wi-Fi access and food and open 24/7. You'll be able to swap ideas with other people. You can rent an office space. You can rent a conference room. It's incredibly flexible.
And this is what they do in Silicon Valley.
Well, that's what the image is. The Starbucks at Cupertino is just a place where people come in and suddenly you're sitting next to people who've got ideas, and the next thing you know, 1 + 1 = 4. That's what they're trying to create at 1871. And the times I've been there, I've been there several times now, it's beginning to work.
And what's great is it houses a lot of wonderful things, one of which is Accelerate Labs, which I think is just one of the best things for Chicago's startup community right now. And what it is, in a nutshell, is it's a 13-week intensive summer accelerator program for new startups. So you apply to be a part of Accelerate. I think 400 companies apply. They pick 10, and then these 10 are housed in 1871. This program is run by Troy Henikoff, who's a great serial entrepreneur in Chicago. And they all have access to all these amazing mentors who have created companies themselves and have so much advice and value they can give to all these new, 22-year-olds who are trying to start a new company. And then it culminates in this big demo day where they pitch their company live at the House of Blues to about 500 investors who are not just in Chicago but come all over the country to see these new startups. And this is the third year here. It's modeled off of some programs called TechStars and Y Combinator and other successful things that happen in places like Silicon Valley and Boston. Now it's here in Chicago, and it's just drawing a ton of attention and doing great things.
Didn't the city of Chicago try to do this about 15 years ago, that it was more of a city-run thing?
There was a facility also in the Merchandise Mart where I know that foreign press were invited to sort of set up shop if they didn't have access to computer link-ups and whatnot. I don't think it was heavily used. This sounds so much more ambitious.
No, it is, John. I do remember
was the
that
International Press Center,
International Press Center, right. But, Bruce, the danger is in getting government involved in these things. I'm totally against them starting
I know that.
Well, I mean, not just
That's
philosophically.
That's why it failed a few years ago.
I think
but didn't something start like
yes,
that?
they did. They had something. Remember, they had that medical center on the south side, and that crashed and burned and never happened. That's because government is not. They don't have any skin in the game. They have got your money and my money, but they don't have their own money because government doesn't exist except what it can take from someone
Well, the thing I'm thinking about, it was formed by a guy who, again, a local guy who didn't stay in Chicago very long. But again, the whole concept.
Filipowski, is that?
No, that was after him. But this was a guy who he had his first session. I was a moderator of one of their early sessions, and. But it seemed to me that the whole purpose of that was a front for the Olympics. It was a way to communicate to the international community that Chicago really was young and hip and innovative, and so they tried to bring all these people together. But it was a thinly veiled division, if you will, of the Olympic bid. And it didn't. Well, obviously, the guy left town, and the whole thing went down the toilet.
Yeah.
So
that'll show you what
leadership. Very innovative.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It'll show you what happens when the government gets involved.
Is anybody, based on the ideas that you're aware of, is anybody dealing with some of these other issues that the city faces? I mean, schools and violence and things of this nature, or are they all products that feed our need for consumerism?
I don't know all of the public sector or soft science or soft issues that are being dealt with in those areas. I know there are plenty of people who are involved in addressing the issue in a sort of a trickle-up theory about making mentors available to at-risk students. That's one of the main focuses of the Chicago Innovation Awards Foundation.
Good idea.
Is to get the kids involved now at the high school level and the college level. Get them, what are your ideas? And we'll show you. We'll give you a mentor. We'll show you how to do it. Come on over to 1871. We'll have somebody there, a fellow, who can guide you along. And
it's also on the front burner of the philanthropies in town. MacArthur and Chicago Community Trust are working very hard on youth violence, and they're coming up. Well, Ceasefire, for instance, is one that they support, where ex-gang members try to chill people out, and there's a lot of summer youth programming, basketball leagues and whatnot, alternatives to just hanging out that's being supported by corporations and philanthropies in the city.
And to give you a good example of, this was a winner from last year's Chicago Innovation Awards that was solely attacking a social issue. It wasn't a product, it wasn't a service. It wasn't on the topic of violence, but it was on food deserts in Chicago. And how do you kind of, crack that nut? So it was a company or an organization.
Hang on just a second. You've set it up. We're going to pause for a moment, and then when we come back, we'll hear the other side of the food desert issue. Back shortly.
that was good.
Bruce Dumont back in Chicago. Thanks very much for being with us. Tonight we're talking about innovations and also whether or not some of the innovation techniques that were used in Silicon Valley can really be replicated here in Chicago. And we're hearing from our guests is that it's really it's moving along. It's not such a new idea anymore. Are you satisfied with the track record that it has thus far?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Plane loads, I'm not kidding, plane loads of VCs, venture capitalists, are coming in every day. They hit the ground and they go to the VC community here and say, show us the next Groupon, show us what's going on. Yeah, there's no question that we've reached some sort of critical mass, and Chicago is now in a position that it's never been in before.
But it's pretty much all tech focused.
Well, the highest growth area is in the digital tech scene. However, I mean, when we talk about innovation through the Chicago Innovation Awards, we're focusing on all areas. But in particular, the digital tech area is really growing, and that's what 1871 and Accelerate Labs and groups like Built in Chicago and Technori, which a few years ago weren't around, and now they're just, attracting so many members and interests. It's because of this focus on digital tech in Chicago right now.
Now, do people who move into this 1871, do they move out quickly as well? Or is that the hope?
It's only been open for 3 weeks. I don't think anyone's moved out just yet.
3 weeks?
Oh, it's brand new. Yeah,
So
May 2nd was the
So
opening.
how many people? I mean, if I were to go there at, let's say, 9 o'clock at night, which is relatively early for my days these last couple of months, I mean, would we'd find 20 people there, 50 people?
Oh,
100 people?
you'd find 50 or more, I'd say, even at that
Really?
late. Yeah, well, it's because when you're young and you're starting a company, you're a hard worker, and they very smartly put a coffee shop right inside 1871, so you can get your caffeine whenever you need it.
Expression?
Well,
impression?
old people can work late too.
I can't, Bruce. I'm dead by 9. I'm out. How about you, John? Can you put it up, babe?
I'm in bed by 11 o'clock. I get my 7 hours.
This is a touchy question. African Americans growing up in Chicago, attending Chicago public schools, do they have a fair shake to break into this community of 20-somethings that are at the merchandise mart the wee hours of the morning, in your view?
Well, it is a tricky one. I guess, what we try to do with our organization is try to spread this message as widely and diverse as possible. So ways that we try to get the word out about this growing innovation community is we'll do a big ad campaign on the buses and trains, because we know that goes everywhere. So I wouldn't say that I have the solution to it. I would say, though, that we see it's, a disproportionate, and when you look at not just race but also gender in this innovation tech world in Chicago, which is largely male-dominated. So we're always doing more to encourage entrepreneurship amongst other groups.
Insofar as there is a gap, and there certainly is, Bruce, it has more to do with background and culture rather than it does an obstacle based on race. In fact, the VCs that we deal with on a regular basis and the companies that we deal with who are looking for interns, they would give special preference to minorities in many ways, minorities and women. As a matter of fact, we had a single conference dealing with the Girl Scouts of America to try to convince young women to be entrepreneurs. You can be an entrepreneur. You can be an innovator, young girls. It was tremendously successful.
Now, you also, tell us about your awards. Your awards are later in the year.
Yes.
But nominations go on now, and if somebody thinks that someone should be nominated, they nominate them.
Exactly. It's the easiest thing in the world. Just give us their name. Go to ChicagoInnovationAwards.com. Click on nominate, and we'll lead you through a 4-step process that'll.
And you also have you've got a media day, and we should mention the media day is going to take place at the Museum of Broadcast
Right here. It'll be the
Communications,
second one.
as
yeah.
it did last year. You were our first special event here.
Yes. And
Tell us what happens at media day, because that is open to the general public.
it's a 3-pronged approach now. It's media, capital, and strategy. And over a course of about 3/4 of the day, we will explain and help by bringing in experts, explain to entrepreneurs, here's how you deal with the media. Here's how you get your story pitched to John McCarran at the Tribune. It's a real how-to kind of approach. Capital, when we surveyed our winners, the second most important thing to them was, how do I raise capital? The first thing was, how do I get recognized? How do I get so they want to know how to raise capital. We'll have VCs there and help them explain that.
Do you need the PR before you get recognized? I mean, normally you would think you'd need some PR story so the VCs know who you are.
Yes. Yeah, you have an elevator pitch.
A VC is a venture capitalist. It's someone with a lot of money who likes to
Take a risk.
give it away and take a risk and give it to people who want it.
Yeah, you've got to have some sort of elevator pitch, a pitch that you can make while the elevator goes from the second to the third floor.
I know about those.
But more importantly, once you get on the ground, you have to get the world to know you're in business, and that's where the media comes in.
John, are you optimistic that Chicago can win this, can do well in this field?
Oh,
Again, given
I
the
am,
mayor that
although-
we have and
Yeah.
the role that he's.
Although the I word maybe the flavor of the year, sustainability and innovation. I go to a lot of these not-for-profit meetings and 501c3, and it's all innovation and sustainability, and it can turn into kind of a buzzword. So I guess getting back to your question, Bruce, about minorities in Chicago, I guess I have more optimism and more hope that the public schools will be able to do a better job of teaching basic numeracy and literacy skills, so a young person can go in and take one of these many jobs that are going unfilled in Chicago, to good jobs, good paying jobs, to operate.
This sounds like it should be in the school system.
Well, yeah, and
when I was in high school, they had a course called sales.
Well,
That's not a bad thing.
not a bad
Not a
thing.
bad thing.
No, it's a good thing.
If you talk to
Home
community,
economics and sales.
If you
how you fry an egg and.
if you talk to community leaders, and you mention the word innovation, they'll say we have more innovation in the ghetto, if I can use that expression, than you have anywhere else. Trouble is, it's usually focused on the underground economy. I mean, there's a lot of innovative spirit there. It's just oftentimes channeled in the wrong direction.
On that note, we're out of time. John McCarron has been with us from the Chicago Tribune and DePaul University. Luke Tanen, director of the Chicago Innovation Awards. And Dan Miller, the founder of the Innovation Awards. And what's the website quickly?
ChicagoInnovationAwards.com.
It's pretty easy to remember, ChicagoInnovationAwards.com. This program is a Genevieve production, produced in association with WS Talk Radio. Our thanks to Lauren Goldman for his assistance in the production of this program, as well as Khalil Khalil. I'm Bruce Dumont. See you next week.